Hey, Terry.
I love you, Danielle. This is so exciting. I mean, this is pure selfishness. I just so miss you and was just the thought of being in conversation with you is a gift. So, hello, it's great to see you.
I mean, there's so much we could talk about and almost never get to the book because you're just a wonderful person. And we've just met that one time, but got along so well. And this was, when I was asked to do this, I was thrilled and I've been excited all day. In a way, in a kind of sixth grade doing a book report for the class.
And I've been so nervous. I mean, I have to tell you, I am in love with Maddie. Your Instagram account. I just, Laura, I'm just so happy to see you. And Malaprops, it's one of my favorite bookstores. I noticed one of my dear friends, Terry Deal, is with us tonight, and we were in graduate school, so it just feels like family. And I want to thank Amica for her support in all these years. And how are you?
I'm relatively well. I'm safe. I'm in a hotel right now. I don't know if you can tell.
I
Um,
wondered, you know.
yeah, there's a hotel I go to write, and this is a place I can get so much done. I don't have to do the dishes. I think that's the main thing. 'Cause
Do
at
they
our
have the
house, I'm doing the dishes all the time. It seems like I'm doing the dishwasher every day.
someone said, "What are you doing during the pandemic?" And I said, "Dishes." And it's brilliant, I mean, it's really true. And our house is a disaster. We have this pack rat that has taken residency, and it's unbelievable, the nests. I mean, Brooke is in a running conversation with this. It lives in the walls. It cut the heating pipe. We got that restored. It's just indomitable. We had a look at it. It's the sweetest looking thing, but you can't believe it. We finally found its nest, and it had a thumb drive. And we thought, what is the thumb drive? So we put it in, we cleaned it all up. We put it in, and it was the first draft of When Women Were Birds from 2012. I have no idea. I didn't even know we had a thumb drive of it. It's just Brooke found, I'm not exaggerating. He found his first wedding ring in the nest. I mean, it was, the original one, but we've been married 45 years. You can't believe what's turning up in this nest. Anyway, I could go on and on about this. This is what our pandemic is out here in the outback.
It's so funny because we have a very similar issue at our house. Uh, a few months ago, in this little crawl space, it's not really an attic because there's only a small entry in the cupboard that you can. It's about this big, and it sounded like somebody was wrestling in there. It was all this bumping around, and I would hit the walls, and it would quiet up, so I knew. I thought probably it's raccoons in there. And then they disappeared. Everything was quiet. Um, we had somebody come over to the house because we were thinking about we were getting the insulation changed in our house because it's a terribly old house and it's really just like having saran wrap up there. And he went up into that space and he said, "Oh my God." It looked like they had lived there for years. They had completely taken over everything. The installation was everywhere. Feces, unbelievable amount of feces. So it's going to take thousands of dollars to clean it out.
And were they raccoons?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We found their entry spot. They're really crafty.
Well, I think it's just incredible. It cost us several thousands to fix our heating. Last year, we didn't know what was wrong. We were wearing our down jackets to bed. I mean, you could see your breath. We had a house guest that stayed here while we were gone, and he called me, said, I am freezing to death. And I went, you are such a wuss. You're from New York. You just don't know what a Western, soul is. And he said there's icicles on the roof. So we had to get some, and there was no heat. And it was like 20 below outside. Anyway, this is where we are, right? Which
Yeah.
it's kind of wonderful that your roommates are other species aside from our wonderful dogs and cats.
Yeah.
But
Well, Maddie, for those who don't know, did book reviews, and she would have done this book, but she has retired from book reviews. She has cataracts now.
I love her so much. I mean, go Tar Heels. It's just my dream in life would have been to have her review one. I mean, she's so smart and she does
Maybe
it.
I'll get her out of retirement.
I will do anything if that were the case. I'm not putting her on the spot, but I can't tell you. I've posted about her. I am her biggest fan. You know that, right?
I know that. I know that. You love
And
her.
I called Andy Greer and just went, I cannot believe it. I cannot believe you got a review from Maddie. And he said it was the most meaningful review he's ever had with his book, Less. So, I mean, believe me, I watch.
Great. That's kind of a segue into your book, do you want to, let's talk about it. And I know I want you to read something first, but there is a chapter, well, ton of wonderful things we'll talk about, but there's a chapter in this book about your dog and about having to put him down. And you wrote that the same way you write everything in this book, which is just with a frank and honest, descriptive, beautiful eye. You don't leave anything out. And it, made me tear up because Maddie is getting, closer to that time. And those events are just devastating. And, that's one of the chapters in the book that devastated me. And I want to thank you for that, for sure.
I mean, our dog companions, they're family, as you well know. And Brooke, I mean, we almost got a divorce over Rio because I had a dream about him. And he was a Basenji. They're difficult dogs. And then I had actually gone to see some Basenjis prior because we'd already had one and we knew they were so spirited. And Brooke just said, we are not having another Basenji. It will be a divorce. And then the owner of these pups, 2 years later called and said, I have a confession to make. You came to look at these dogs and you left a scarf and I didn't return it. And she said, I just left it on our couch. And we've had one puppy, and the minute it could walk, it went over, took your scarf, and wrapped himself around it. And he's your dog. And I went, you are the most brilliant marketer I've ever heard. I said, if we come get that dog, it will be a divorce. And I said, there's no way. And she said, well, I'm telling you the truth. I am saving this dog for you. And then about a month later, she called and said, there's people that want this dog, but it's your dog. Are you coming? And I said, it will be a divorce. Long story shorter, I then had a dream. I said to Brooke, I'm getting this dog because it's ours to be in relationship with. And he said, it will be divorce. We got in a fight. I left him on the road with his baggage, literally in Salt Lake City, Utah, in front of PetSmart. Went and got the food, everything, and drove 4 hours into Indian country and got Rio. Brooke came home about a week later. He had to take the bus home. And we met him at the bus station and they fell in love. And that was a 15-year love affair. And so, he was family. He was difficult. He was wild. And he was extraordinary, as we always think our dog people are. So it was painful.
Well,
But
if there was going to be a divorce in your family, it sounded like towards the end, you would have been the one to leave him because his relationship with Rio was very close.
oh my God, I left. for 3 months for a writer's retreat, when I came home, Rio was in the passenger seat, would not leave. He was sleeping in our bed on my side and would not move. I had moved into a man camp, and we finally had to have some serious conversations. And my favorite thing, Daniel, is we were driving home one night. It was late. Rio, we're in our truck in the desert. Rio was where the console is. He had his paw on Brooke's shoulder, and Brooke just goes, "I love him so much." And I just said, "Brooke, how did it go?" I said, "He's a dog." This doesn't speak well for me, And he goes, "No, Terry, he's a little boy in a brown dog suit, And I mean, that's really how it was.
Yeah.
So thank you for mentioning that essay. I started at first with that because I knew this was going to be a hard book. I didn't know how hard. I didn't know what was coming, but I wanted to start with love, and that there is loss among us, and we are both eroding and evolving at once, and grief is love. I just didn't know how prescient that essay would be to what was coming.
Mm-hmm. Well, would you read from the book?
Sure. So I'm going to read a piece I've never read, Daniel, because I love taking risks with you, but it's called The Park of the Future. And I'll just read it. It is 21:55. The Colorado River is now an ephemeral river that runs only in the spring due to the aridification of the American Southwest. Drought is too kind of, I'm so nervous. I'm going to start over. It is 21:55. The Colorado River is now an ephemeral river that runs only in the spring due to the aridification of the American Southwest. Drought is too kind a word for where we are now. Canyonlands National Park has been left alone and remains a geologic park, though it's accessible only by enclosed viewing stations at Island in the Sky and the Needles Overlook that are cooled by solar power. It is too hot to descend into the canyons below. Travel by car or bus is prohibited. The roads are closed. Historical scars reminiscent of a time when the world was fueled by gasoline and people drove cars without thinking. The relentless heat has buckled and cracked the pavements. Entry by foot is rare, though some remaining desert mothers and fathers make their yearly pilgrimages to Druid Arch at their own peril, driven by the force of their religious convictions. Virtual reality goggles are provided at the lookout stations where hardy visitors, many of whom knew these erosional parks as children or from the cherished photographs of their ancestors, they come to remember what these red rock landscapes were, that they were places of inspiration and a desert ecology blossomed each year. No longer. The land can't support much life at all. The goggles repopulate the barren landscape with the plants and animals that once lived in this high desert. Sage, chamisa, blackbrush, brittlebrush, globe mallow, primrose, yucca, prickly pear, and willows. Cottonwood trees redrawn along the mighty Colorado River draw gasps. Ringtails, mountain lions, and mule deer inspire awe. The travelers leave the virtual and look out over the real. Ravens can still be seen, tricksters that they are, in the red rock chasms lifted by the afternoon thermals. A few reptiles remain, eating scattered insects, among them collared lizards, whiptails, and rattlesnakes, which are adapting to a more meager diet, and whose dry desert rattles can now be heard more as a haunting than a warning. Canyonlands National Park is staffed by robots who have been programmed to tell the geologic story of Canyonlands and the story of the life that once flourished here. They look like the human counterparts of past decades in the gray and green uniforms and stiff-brimmed hats. The difference is they can withstand the extreme temperatures of well above 120 degrees Fahrenheit and do not need water, now rationed among the few residents who manage to live nearby. There have been two great exoduses in the Colorado Plateau, the robot says, one in the Holocene, led by the pre-Puebloan people, and the other in the Anthropocene, which is occurring now. Climate refugees, migrants are retreating not only from the rising seas on the east and west coasts of the United States of America, but from the rising heat in the desert Southwest. America's national relocation parks, scattered throughout the Midwest and Great Lakes region, are sites for internal migration as the Great Escape continues. In this new era of climate conformation, we are learning to adapt to the conditions we once denied. The National Park robot turns to the visitors. I invite you to step outside briefly and feel the burning beauty uninhabitable now to most species.
Thank you so much, Terry. And I can't believe that you haven't read from that chapter, because it is an encapsulation, at least of a lot of this book. It's science fiction in a way. You know, you've written science fiction, but it's like the best science fiction is just a step away from the reality that we're living in now. So it's completely believable that could actually be the case. And I've written down all these questions here, and I'm also so excited and nervous that I just forget everything. But the book is called Erosion, and each section begins, the title of it is a different kind of erosion. The first section is erosion of home, erosion of safety is the next, erosion of democracy, and erosion of belief. These are dark titles. And I wanted you, if you have the book right there, would you turn to page 315 and go to the very bottom of the page, that last paragraph, and read that.
Yeah. As a writer, that one that starts there. As a writer, I inhabit metaphors. Erosion is a force, like wind, like love, like grief, breaks bodies down. But it can also, in time, create an unexpected, steady state of grace, even a momentary stability at its core. The recognition we feel inside us when certain images and emotions outside us are evoked is another kind of resonance. A sandstone tower laboring to become, always becoming, is weathering like us, with no end in sight. Change is ever present.
So there's that chapter that you read, and that paragraph illustrates the balancing act that you're performing in this book. And it makes me wonder, are you an optimist?
I have a sense of humor.
I know you do.
And I think about that haiku by Isa, insects on a bough floating down river, still singing. I don't know what's ahead, but I know being home in this desert in the Colorado Plateau has been sobering. It has been beautiful. It has been magical. It has been deeply informative, but it's also been brutal. In fact, it just caught me when I said, temperatures were 120 this summer. For an extended period of time, it was between 110 and 113. At one point, it registered 115. You can't breathe. It's suffocating. And then add on top of that, much of our little valley of 250 inhabitants was choked in smoke from the fires in Colorado, from the fires in California and the Pacific Northwest. There were mornings that were so apocalyptic, you just saw the sun rise like a cigarette burn in smoke. There was a day, it was so thick, Daniel, that our smoke alarm inside the house went off. And it was grim. You couldn't go outside. It was too hot. You would die. You couldn't sit anywhere. And Brooke and I took to walking at night. We did night walks for much of the summer. And it was a glory. Suddenly I didn't realize, but your eyes adapt. Not only were we met with eye shine of deer and jackrabbits, and one night we saw a bear, but it's almost like the darkness inside us met the darkness outside us and created a point of light. And your eyes at night could pull the colors out and you would see more clearly, especially in moonlight. So, am I hopeful? I was reading this book by John Freeman, The Dictionary of Undoing, and hope is not a word in my vocabulary. Faith is. My great grandmother would always say, faith without works is dead. It's a Mormon saying. But he brought me back into a place of hope, defining hope as an energy field. In that, I do feel that there's an energy field right now circulating around the planet, around the climate crisis, for one, that is very potent, around racial justice, that is very potent, that in our undoing, in this moment of reckoning, there is an awakening. What the outcome can be, I don't think any of us can know. But it breaks my heart when I see what the drought is doing to the deer, to the birds. They arrive from Tucson panting. Biologists during the fires, 5 million acres burned, were finding tens of thousands of birds falling from the sky in Great Sands National Park in New Mexico. So it's dire.
Yeah.
But I still feel joyous. How about you?
I think it depends on what day or what time of day. I think I can be darker than that. I think that there's sometimes I would encourage people not to have children, because of the world that they will inherit. At the same time, activism implies optimism, that if you weren't hopeful or at least faithful, you wouldn't do it. You would just give up and succumb to the inevitability of what you feel might happen. So sometimes I'm just I'm just numb. Especially this past 4 years have been some of the hardest years of certainly my adult life, and to the extent that I couldn't look at the newspaper. It was just everything, everywhere you turned was upsetting, and I really had to do a lot of mental exercises preparing for defeat in this last election, this potential defeat. What would I do? I know people talk about, the cliche is going to Canada, but that's not an option really. And it's enduring, reality, but how could I live the life that I am accustomed to, creation, writing books, and my books are not, my books, they're novels, and I'm not an activist. That is something else I wanted to ask you. You are a writer and you are an activist, and being one or the other is a full-time job. And how do you think of yourself? And again, I guess this is another question about the balancing act that you have to perform as Terry Tempest Williams.
I don't see that division. To me, it's not about being a writer or an activist. It's about being a human being engaged.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I think about Emily Dickinson when she says, life is a spell so exquisite, everything conspires to break it. What comes into my mind is how do we not respond? You and I respond through story. And if something is threatened that you love, which for me is this land and these creatures that we live so intimately with, even in our own homes, then the response is to fight or the response is to say, we will keep the open space of democracy open. And in those two arenas, it's not just the Trump administration, it's been every administration here with oil and gas development, with the Endangered Species Act. And two things that in this last year that has been so difficult that I would agree with you, the last 4 years in particular, where everything we love has been defiled and denigrated and dismissed and destroyed. Living near Indian country, living and working with Native people has changed my life, and decades-long friendships that have been so profoundly transformative to me. And being an ally during the struggle of Bears Ears National Monument, you know, I learned so much from the elders. You know, after Trump had gutted it, less than a year then when President Obama, through the 1906 Antiquities Act, established the Bears Ears National Monument, 1.3 million acres, I went down to see Willie Gray Eyes and I said, what do you do with your anger? And I'll never forget with this unbelievable calm, and he is fierce, so much integrity. He's been a community organizer all of his life, lives in Navajo Mountain, at Navajo Mountain. He's now a county commissioner. He said, Terry, it can no longer be about anger. It has to be about healing. And that felt so passive to me, you know, and I pressed him and we continued talking and he said, you have to go to the source of your pain. And if you have a splinter in your heel and you do not go to the source of that discomfort, then you're going to lose your foot. And he said, you know, Bears isn't just to protect and to heal our people. It's to protect and heal all people. And then over the year, you know, he talked about how the United States has never made an apology to Native people for a cultural genocide that is still ongoing, even during COVID, especially during COVID. So there's that. Or Jonah Yellowman saying, we have to go deeper. You know, what does that look like? What does that mean? And again, the perspective, you know, that we think it's hard now. This is what they've always lived with, you know, since colonial times. And he just, you know, even in this last escapade, what do you call it? You know, the stainless steel monolith that mysteriously appeared in Canyonlands, right where this story took place that I had just read, in Bears Ears, in the original configuration. Now it's outside of Bears Ears. You know, people are saying, what do you think? What do you think? Is it art? Is it aliens? And now it's gone. So it appeared, it disappeared. But what I loved is what the Dine, what came out of the elders, was why this international sensation over a piece of steel that is hollow inside? Where was the sensation, the outrage, the beauty, the intrigue over Bears Ears when it was gutted? And I think that's really the question. And that actually does give me hope that there is a native intelligence that is here, an indigenuity that is circling the planet, that I think is looking at climate change, that they do have stories that bring them strength and something beyond hope. And I think the other thing, Daniel, in answer to your question, is collaboration. I'm very aware of the limits of my own imagination, especially now isolated, home, alone. Imaginations shared create collaboration. In collaboration, we find community, and in community, anything is possible. And I feel that sense of community and collaboration with you, you know? So that's what's keeping me upright right now.
Well, the collaboration is on display throughout your book in many ways. And perhaps in the biggest way is I have never seen an acknowledgement as vast as yours. And, in many, an author, most usually it's maybe a 3/4 of a page, thanking all the regular people. This section of acknowledgements in your book has to be 20 pages long.
No, I know exactly how long it is because my editor said this is ridiculous. You know, um, I think it's 1,500 words, and it may be 7 pages long. I don't know, but it's over. These essays were over 7 years, and they weren't mine. Many of them were written with another person. Um, Most of them came out of community organizing. Uh, I, it would, really, all of their names should have been on the cover. I mean, they didn't come out of one person. They came out of a multitude of people, and I really wanted to acknowledge that, and I really meant it.
Yeah. Oh, I have no doubt that you
And
did.
I wanted, we've had this gathering of the women of Bears Ears, um, Hopi, Zuni, Navajo, Pueblo, Ute, Mountain Ute, and they've been coming to our house for the last, you know, for quite a while. And I wanted every one of those women's names to appear in this book because of the stories that they have shared.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, that's the most important part of the book.
Yeah, it's actually written. It's like it is not just a listing of names. It's a benediction. It's a gathering of everything that makes this book possible. And that sense of collaboration, obviously, is also an extenuation of your role as an activist, because that is not something that you do by yourself.
It's true. And you're the only person that said anything about that. And it's one of the reasons why I so appreciate you, is because I think you have that sense of gratitude um,
Yeah.
and deep commitment to community. I saw that in Chapel Hill.
Yeah. That was such a great time having you there. It's, um,
I
when you,
think about the conversations we had in the car,
yeah.
and
Oh, yeah. Yes, I remember those conversations. Oh,
just the wildness of them, and I
yeah.
mean, this is to me what, it's the stories we bring to each other, right?
Yeah.
And you know how I feel about big fish. That changed my life. I thought it made me feel less lonely in the world. It made me feel less crazy in the world. And, I have kept this for, well, it's March 29th, 2015. And you wrote 4 words in my next book. Do you remember this?
Don't.
Armadillo, cormorant, kookaburra, and buffalo. And I wondered, is that true? Were they the words in your next book?
Um, I think some of them made it in there. Terry, my problem as a writer is that, and I don't know if it's a real problem. It's just illustrative of who I am. While I'm writing a book, it's pretty much all I can think about.
You're in
And
a hotel. You're in a hotel.
yeah, I love it. I love to do that. That keeps me, it keeps me going. But after I write the book, all the characters are banished. Everything is banished, and uh, readers will refer to a scene in a book, and I will have to look it up and just trust them that that's there. Sometimes I'm really impressed with myself that I wrote something like that, because I don't even I'm so much smarter on the page than I am in real life, and I think that's the way it should be. Um, but
I
you,
have kept this on my desk for 5 years, more than
I've
5 years,
had,
because it reminds me of, of, of really who should be in
yeah,
our books,
yeah,
armadillo, cormorant, kookaburra, buffalo. I just love that.
those are beautiful words. They really go together. Um, I still have the river stone that you gave me, which weirdly looks a lot like that steel thing that was put up in the desert. It's about um, same dimensions except teeny. And I have a little a space on my desk where I keep these objects that inspire me, and that's right there with my glass eye collection.
Which I know you collect. I know. It's amazing. Um,
The book, um, so it's filled. What I loved about it is it's got ideals, ideas. You talk about grief and love and all these things, and so those are wonderful on their own. But you talk about things, you make it you concretize your ideals, you concretize your emotions, and so I remember that list, which I'm scared to leave the Zoom if because the book is like 3 feet away, and I don't know if I go and get it, maybe I'll never come back. But you have a list in that book, which is a page and a half long, of all the things that you miss when you're not at home.
I wrote it to my father. May I read it?
Yes, that's what it, please.
Okay, let me find it. Again, I haven't read this either. Where is it? Hang on. I don't even know. You know what? I'm the same way. Once you finish a book, it's like it has its own life, right? I don't even remember.
Did I write down the page?
Oh, here it is.
Oh, page 219.
Yeah, here it is. October 8th, 2017. Dearest Father, here is the truth. I miss the American West terribly. I'm in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I've been gone a month. I've never been away from home more than 3 months, so this is traumatizing. October 8th, 2017, dearest Father, here's the truth. I miss the American West terribly. So much so that the other day, as I sat down to make a grocery list, it somehow morphed into an accounting of all the things I long for at home in the desert. Here's my list. 1, sage. 2, meadowlark. 3, collared lizard. 4, sandstone. 5, a night sky of stars. 6, wind. 7, rain. Heat waves, lightning, clouds, coyote, water, moon, jackrabbit, antelope, squirrel, mule deer, turkey vulture, arrowhead, handprints on slick rock walls, ringtails, great horned owl, raven, cottontail, globe mallow, mountain lion, sand, bone, stones, 29 juniper, 30 pinyon, 31 rainbows, 32 turquoise, 33 bluebirds, 34 black widow spiders, 35 the smell of rain in the desert, 36 the Colorado River running red, 37 milk.
You know things. I mean, that is beauty right there, is this attachment to the things of the world. You know, I have 100 other things to talk about. I know that Stephanie's going to get on here in a second and say we need to go to questions, which I want to as well. But I'm going to just tell you a really, really quick story about why, in one way, I'm the worst person to do what we're doing here. You know, you are the West. You know, you are a child of the West. I was born in Alabama, and when I was 19, I went on a trip around the country, a car trip around the country with my girlfriend. And after a while, it was this little Toyota, and after a while, we were at each other's throats. I mean, it was hot, you know, Arkansas was full of bugs. You couldn't go to the bathroom anywhere. It was just, you know, everything was bad. And she started like taking the knobs off the radio and throwing them out the window. So we were so at odds when we got to the Grand Canyon. We got to the Grand Canyon and she said, well, let's go see the Grand Canyon. And I said, no, I'm not. She said, come on, let's go see it. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm going to sit in the car. You go see it. I'll just wait here. So I have driven up to the Grand Canyon, but I never got out of the car to see it.
I understand that. I totally understand it. It's one of the reasons why I love you so much. And I think that the West though, because I think there is this incredible affinity between the South and the West.
Mhm.
We're not taken seriously. We're demeaned. We're full of stereotypes. Um,
True.
we're land-based.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we both are part of a civil war that has never ended.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're exactly the person that I have wanted to talk to about this book. And I can tell you, we have talked about things that I haven't talked anywhere else,
Yeah.
or that I didn't even recognize. And I think that's why you're a great writer, because you see things. I mean, you say I know things. It's just the things that are outside the door. But Daniel, you see things. And I'm really interested, before we open it up for questions, what's obsessing you now? Can you talk about what you're thinking about, what you're writing at this moment?
Well, I can tell you very briefly because we'll take up time, but um, and weirdly, now this relates to your book as well. Suicide.
Really?
Yeah. I'm writing, I'm just finishing a book about my brother-in-law's suicide. And he was a mentor of mine. And I, I found 10 years after he died, I found his diaries in the back of a closet, and nobody knew exactly why he did what he did. And I read 20 years of his diaries and was able to reconstruct his life and understand what led to that. And you have an unbelievably brilliant chapter on your brother's suicide, which again, unflinching and honest and true. And I think everybody should read that. It's so, so moving.
I'm sorry about your brother-in-law, and I'm glad you're writing about it. And will it be a novel or is it
It's a
nonfiction?
memoir.
So it's a memoir. Wow, Daniel.
Yeah, my first nonfiction. So
Well, and how are you taking care of yourself while you're writing it? Because that's tough stuff.
I've been doing it for quite some time, and at some point in the writing, I have to detach myself from the human, that sentimental connection to the work, and be able to see it far enough away in order to shape it, to make it palatable and understandable to somebody who's not me. So there were tears in the beginning as I was composing it, but as I wrote it and as I had to excuse myself from it and just tell this story.
Mhm.
So we really should take some questions. I know that there are a
We'll
few down
continue
here.
this. Thank
Stephanie, are you
you.
going to do?
Yes, I will read the questions out. And thank you for reminding me a moment ago. I was so caught up in your conversation that I lost track of time myself. So we do have some questions from the audience, and we'll jump right in. As soon as I say thank you, it's been wonderful and edifying to listen to you both, and not just because you both enjoy each other's company, but that's certainly part of it, is the fact that you're not just sort of trading questions about a book, but so it's just always nice to share space with people who enjoy sharing space with each other. And
Stephanie, thank you for bringing us together.
My pleasure. I was just going to say, one of my favorite things about, even though the whole sort of virtual event thing is not ideal in so many ways, I'll just say on a personal note, I so enjoy when we are able to arrange these events, and these are the moments when people who haven't seen each other in a while get together. in this space, and it's just a great thing to be able to facilitate. So
Thank you.
it's our pleasure, my pleasure personally. So thank you both. Okay, so first question starts with a lovely comment, and Ellis says to Terry, "Thank you for reading that excerpt, the first excerpt you read. That chapter was the most hauntingly powerful moment for me when reading this book. I'm curious why this was your first reading of it."
I don't know. You know, maybe because I don't want to face what's coming, and the fact that it's almost here. I mean, it might be the saddest story in the book, because even the story of my brother's death by suicide, in the end, my youngest brother and I were able to witness his cremation, and it was a transformative experience. And I feel that we honored my brother's vow. He wanted sky. And so maybe that's why I'm just thinking this for the first time. And again, it's a tribute to Daniel, because whenever, you know, I mean, our conversations are always real. And maybe that is what I fear most, because it's not science fiction.
Thank you. Thank you again for sharing the reading and for sharing your thoughts and thinking through that with us in real time. That's a sort of a special act, you know, and it's very open of you, so we appreciate that. I will move on to the next question, which is specifically about bear's ears, Terry. And Helen asks, how effective has SUWA, Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance, is that right, been in saving bear's ears? How their efforts, how's that gone?
I love SUA, the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance, and they have been a great ally working with the Intertribal Coalition. And they've been doing this work for decades in terms of protecting wilderness. The bear's ears, I think, brought us all to a collaborative space that we have not known as largely white conservationists. And Scott Groney, who's at the helm of SUA, worked on the Navajo reservation, was an Indian law attorney, along with others that have worked at SUA. So there's a deep respect and sensitivity and love for these Native nations. So I think that they have been a great partner. They've been a great ally. Certainly the tribes have led on this. But in terms of the overall protection of Utah's public lands in the Colorado Plateau, I think they have been stealth. And it's a privilege to be able to support and be part of that community.
Excellent, thank you. I just want to say that one of the things that struck me as you were speaking just now, and when speaking to Daniel as well, was there's so many ways in which our picture of how things are and how the American West is in particular, is contrary to reality. And one of those ways is when we think about the West as the land of rugged individualism, and you drew a picture of collaboration in that space. And the other is, I think, the picture that often comes to mind when we hear the word conservationist, and that picture is of a white man in a wide-brimmed hat. and that the faces of the people who have inhabited these spaces for thousands of years doesn't slot in next to that word in our internal dictionaries. And so I wanted to ask you just sort of a general question about when you started coming to these realizations about needing to counter some of those narratives, and feeling compelled to do that.
I think first as a woman, in a very male-dominated, white male-dominated landscape. And then I think globally you see indigenous communities, I think environmental justice, when you look at where environmental injustices have occurred, they are in communities of color, they are marginalized communities. And being a downwinder, half my family's dead from cancer, from nuclear testing in the Nevada desert. That is a history that we share with Native people, whether it's, the Shivwits Nation that is right next to the test site, very close to that, whether it's Diné Navajo uranium miners that have lost their lives, where that legacy is still continuing. The whole American Southwest is the atomic West, and we share that with Native people. And so to me, it was never a white issue. It was about where we dwell in seemingly disposable landscapes. And also, if you look at the government proceedings, Mormons and Indians were a, quote, low use segment of the population, therefore expendable when they were doing Nevada test sites, when they were doing testing the atomic bomb. Those bombs were never tested when the winds were blowing toward California. So I think early on as a child, I witnessed those bombs. It's always been an integrated story, but also a story wrought with racism, because my religion, viewed Native people as cursed Lamanites in the Book of Mormon. So it's a complicated history, and it's what I keep rubbing up against, even my own white supremacy in the history that I hold. So it's not without its complications.
Of course. Well, and recognizing that and acknowledging it, speaking that truth is part of the process of making any progress. I think, one of the ways in which we've failed, often to make change is just refusing to recognize the uncomfortable, the uncomfortable things and have the uncomfortable conversations. And
one of the roughest essays in this book is called Boom, with the recognition that Utah is a beautiful violence. I've never connected the dots, because again, it's too painful when this place, this place, this place. But if you see the overview, a Raven's point of view, it's harrowing.
So I'm going to paraphrase a question from Roberta while we're on this topic. And actually I want to pause because it is 8 o'clock. But I would like to get to one more question, but I want to gauge your willingness to stick around for a couple more minutes and let folks know that if they do need to leave, that certainly they can.
And I want to be mindful of your time, Daniel, but I'm fine.
I'm great. I'm in my hotel room. Nothing's going on except this, which I love. I love you. You're so beautiful.
And I have all the time in the world. It's just dark here.
So we really do want to be conscientious of everyone's time, but this has been such a wonderful conversation. And so we'll just take a few more minutes, and thank you to everyone who can stick around. And if you can't, thank you again for joining us. And we hope to see you again soon. So Roberta is asking what we can do to change the chilling scenario of the future that you read, and saying specifically, is it calling the Biden transition team over and over again, calling for the appointment of Deb Haaland? But if you just have any thoughts, any ideas for actions people can take, or how folks can direct their energy at this point?
I mean, that's certainly one of the great questions, right? Today, it was just reported on NPR that the current president is moving, I don't even have the language, lightning fast to open up the oil and gas leasing permits in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. In the same way it's happening here in the Utah desert, in New Mexico, Arizona, the mining. I mean, it's across the board. They are doing rapid fire fossil fuel development on our public lands and native lands. And I think we have to put the word out that whoever buys these oil and gas leases are going to be boycotted. It's not in their best interest to do that. There's no money there. There's a glut of oil. It's malice. I think we have to call it for what it is. I think we have to put pressure on the Biden administration that there should be no more oil and gas leasing on federal lands. 25 million acres are already leased to oil and gas companies, responsible for 25% of the carbon emissions in this country, making us the 5th largest country in the world as contributing to climate change. So that's a start. And I think having intergenerational conversations about what this climate crisis means. It's one thing to have an awakened consciousness, which I think is happening in the world. It's another thing to enact that consciousness in real time and space. And that's tough. I haven't been on a plane in almost a year, and I want to keep it that way. You know, I don't want to go back to that life that was so hypocritical. So I think it's really looking in the mirror and saying, if I want the world to change, how do I begin here in my own heart, my own life?
And that's I think a really important point, because a lot of times I think we get to the point where we see all of these things happening and we just want to do something to change the thing that has been brought to our attention, and that is this outward action about what's happening over there, and it's often so much harder to look inward first. And
I also think it's our own local communities, and the pandemic has brought us all home to our knees, and what we thought was a pause is now a place. And so how do we engage in that place? And I think that's where the real radical change occurs, neighbor to neighbor, and especially at this moment in time when we don't all agree. How do we make those bridges? And I'm really interested in doing that, because those are bridges with my own family. I don't think we can afford this divide.
Absolutely. This next question is for you, Daniel. It puts a smile on my face because I'm just going to ask it as written and let you answer. You mentioned book reviews by retired Maddie. Last name, please.
She's my dog. She doesn't have a last name. I've never thought of giving a dog a last name. I guess she deserves one for sure. But if you would like to view her book reviews, they are on my Instagram site, Daniel Wallace 1, the numeral 1. And check back soon for her review of Erosion, because I definitely think for this book that I can will her out of her retirement.
I would have died and gone to heaven if I won't even know how to handle it. I don't care if it's a bad review. I don't care if it's a scathing review. I just want to hear her talk about it.
She would never, ever do that. She's a lover of things. Yeah.
But she has a point of view, you know.
Yeah, she does have a point of view.
I'll just note that Daniel's Instagram and Twitter and Terry's Instagram and Twitter are in the chat, so that you can go ahead and click on those links or copy and paste those over so that you can follow them as soon as you leave the Zoom, and you can check out Maddie's reviews and Daniel's wonderful illustrations as well on your Instagram. Yeah, thank you.
Oh my God, there's this wonderful, where did I see it, Daniel? It was one of your cartoons where an older man is speaking to his son. They're both masked and says, "One day you will inherit this all." I love that so much for its wickedness and truth.
Yeah, one day this will all be yours.
Yeah, one day this will all be yours. I mean, a lot to account for, our generation.
Yes.
So I'll make this our final question, and you've given us all so much to think about. Before
we do, I want to say, Stephanie, you have done an amazing job moderating this and just setting it up. It's so well done. I have been on other Zooms which have not been excellent, and this has been. I really want to thank you for that.
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you to say. The whole process heightens my insecurity every time. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, audience, for indulging that. Thank you.
I just want to second what Daniel said, and I appreciate your background. It's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And this one, Terry, I'm sorry, this was a gift. I'm going to go ahead and, since we're here late anyway, the lacquer screen that's behind me was a gift from my first bookstore employer. I worked at a used rare and antiquarian bookshop, and this was given to me by the owner of that store and his partner, and I thank them. Okay, final question, and then we'll wrap up for this evening. And Terry, this was directed to you, but I would like for both of you to answer. What are you thinking about and writing about now? And Daniel, I know you mentioned what you're working on as well, but if you want to elaborate, so what are you thinking about and writing about?
Daniel.
Oh, me? Yeah. Yes. So this book is about what happens for me when the person who really is responsible for me becoming a writer and a cartoonist decides to kill himself, and what that means for me, and what it means for art, about, how is it possible for art to save us, to take us away from our natural inclination, because I really do believe he had an inclination to kill himself all of his life, and his every day was a choice to stay alive. And he was, as you said, in talking about your brother, he was really brave. He was brave to have been alive for that long. And honoring his choice is something that, because we don't think of people who take their own lives as being honorable in a way. That was a great journey for me. So yeah, this is my most, valuable. I don't want to say it's my best or most important or anything like that, but for me, it's my most valuable book. What about you, Terry?
I can't wait to read it. And I so honor the journey it must have be taking you on. I don't know what's next for me personally. I'm interested in collaboration right now, and I finished a collaboration. We didn't know it would end up being a book, but the photographer Fazl Sheikh, who lives in Switzerland, his father was born in Kenya. His family was born in Pakistan. His mother's American. We became friends. We've been doing work together with Bears Ears, with the tribes. And we were supposed to do a story on methane gas in the Four Corners region. We couldn't do it because of the COVID. So I'll make this short. He sent me 30 photographs of 30 years of his work. He photographs magnificently, bravely, brilliantly, communities in conflict, war zones, Rwandan genocide, conflict between Palestine and Israel, doing diptychs where you can't tell who's the Israeli and who's the Palestinian. And he called it 30 Moons. I didn't know how to enter that work. I'm so used to dealing with rock and stone and animals, how to even enter into my own species. And I sat with it. And then I realized with the full moon, I was going to make a commitment to really look at them, to enter them as though they were doors and other worlds, which they are. And I took my grandmother's looking glass that I inherited, and I took one photograph a day and meditated on that photograph and then wrote him a letter. So I wrote him 30 letters from the full moon in July to the full moon in August. And then I mailed them to him. And then, you know, it was the gift begets a gift. And then Fazl just said, you know, why don't we share this? I was hesitant because these letters are personal and private, and they transgress, and they may be politically incorrect. They are raw, and they're like a jazz riff. But then I thought, we're in the middle of a pandemic. This is how we take care of each other. And if we don't have these hard conversations, if we don't write without being edited, even editing ourselves, then who are we? And so the masks are off, even as this is a time of wearing masks. And that will be out in the next couple of weeks. So they're his photographs and my letters.
Well, thank you.
It's called The Moon is Behind Us.
The Moon is Behind Us. Wonderful, thank you. So
thank you for asking. And I just want to say, I know that question was from Cheryl Miller, who is a dear friend. Cheryl, sorry, nervous. Cheryl Merrill, who does wonderful work with elephants. So thank you. Thank you for asking both of us.
Of course. And thank you both again for this evening. It really has been a pleasure listening to you. And even when the subject matter has not been light and airy, it's still been a pleasure sharing and listening to you share with each other. So thank you.
Certainly
so
has
much.
for me as well. It's been such a joy to see you, Terry, and to do this. And I think we should go on tour together.
I will follow you anywhere. And I just, you know, I think for those of you who have stayed with us, and Stephanie, and, you know, I think all we have is our relationships. And Daniel, you are a treasured friend to me. Even though we don't see each other, you reside in my heart. And I hope this conversation continues.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I will just say that you have my vote for the tour, or the maybe consider a podcast, something to keep the conversation going.
Oh, I did want to also say thank Ryan as well.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Yep, Ryan Byrne has been diligently in the background posting links. Thank you, Ryan. He is of relation by marriage.
Thank you.
So thank you, Ryan. And Terry, I know that you had some final words that you wanted to share before I end the meeting this evening.
I'll just make it very short. I'm just so grateful. What a beautiful evening. I mean, this is, and I just want to say, please, everyone, take care of yourself. It's going to be a rough 2 months. This is just the closing paragraph, and it has to do with what Castleton Tower has been determined that it has a pulse. Scientists have confirmed that this 400-foot sandstone monolith, a true monolith, has a resonance, a heartbeat, as it were. A fuller kind of kinship and rapport beyond our own species is possible. Flesh yielding to fur, bodies conforming to rock. The resonance of stone speaks to our resistance. The resonance of stone is the resistance. We are not alone in what we feel. The vibrational power alive within Castleton Tower is also alive in us. It is heard in the wombs of our mothers. Imagine how this magnetic force field of feeling could erode the corrosive power wielded over the earth and galvanize and evolve power in relationship with the earth. Weathering change creates new forms of ascension, not without its difficulties. When so much is collapsing around us, bowing to beauty as old structures fall and new routes are found, is the unexpected gesture of surprise. Castleton Tower has a pulse. The earth has a pulse. We have a pulse. We are alive to a resounding world awakening. Thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you, Daniel, and thank you to all of you and Ryan who have stayed with us. Bless you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again, and good night, everyone. Please take good care.
Good night.